You didn't spend more this year than last year. You didn't buy anything extravagant. You didn't change your habits. But somehow, at the end of the month, there's less left over. And next year, there will be even less. This isn't bad luck. It isn't your fault. It's a system that has been working exactly as designed for over 300 years. Your money loses value every single year, quietly, automatically, legally. And the people who designed the system knew exactly what they were building. This is EcoHistory. Let's talk about inflation, not the textbook definition, the real story. Every major central bank in the world has an official inflation target: the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England. That target is 2% per year. Not zero, not as low as possible, exactly 2%. Think about what that means. The most powerful financial institutions on Earth have collectively decided that your money should lose 2% of its purchasing power every single year, by design, on purpose, as policy. At 2% annual inflation, your money loses half its value in 35 years. The dollars your parents saved for retirement in 1990 by roughly half of what they bought then. And 2% is the target. In reality, we've seen much higher. Between 2021 and 2023, U.S. inflation peaked at over 9%. UK inflation hit 11%. The Eurozone reached 10%. Prices rose faster than at any point in 4 decades. And the money sitting in your savings account? It earned maybe 0.5% interest, while prices rose 9%. That gap between what your savings earn and what inflation takes, that's the silent tax, and it's been running for centuries. This isn't a modern invention. Governments have been slowly stealing value from money as long as money has existed. In ancient Rome, the silver denarius started out 95% pure silver. By the 3rd century, it was less than 5%. Emperors kept the same coin, same name, same face, but hollowed it out from the inside. Prices exploded, trust collapsed, the empire fractured. Medieval kings did the same thing differently. They recalled coins, melted them down, added cheaper metals, and reissued them at full face value. More coins, less silver, same trick, different century. In England, this practice was so common that people started clipping the edges off coins before spending them, shaving a little silver for themselves before passing it on. The government's response? Make clipping a capital offense. Execution for doing what the Crown was already doing at scale. The method changed in 1694 when the Bank of England was created. No more clipping coins. Now you could just print paper, backed by a promise, issued at will, and inflated whenever convenient. Same outcome, different mechanism. The value of money could now be reduced not by touching the coin, but by creating more of them. For most of modern history, paper money was tied to gold. You couldn't just print unlimited currency. Every dollar had to correspond to a certain amount of gold held in reserve. This kept governments honest, partially. Then came August 15, 1971. President Nixon appeared on television and announced that the United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold. Just like that, the last anchor was cut. From that moment, the dollar, and through it most of the world's currencies, became what economists call fiat money, backed not by gold, not by silver, not by anything tangible, backed only by trust, by belief, by the collective agreement that the paper means something. And when money is backed only by trust, the temptation to print more is irresistible. In 1971, the total U.S. money supply was around $600 billion. Today, it exceeds $21 trillion. The number of dollars in existence has multiplied by 35 in 50 years. More dollars chasing the same goods, that's inflation. Not a mystery, not an accident, a mathematical consequence of a decision made in 1971 that most people have never heard of. Nixon called it a temporary measure. It became permanent, and it changed the relationship between governments, banks, and ordinary people forever. Here's the part nobody in power wants to explain clearly. Inflation doesn't hurt everyone equally. It hurts savers, it helps borrowers, and the biggest borrower in any economy is always the government. When a government owes $30 trillion and inflation runs at 5%, the real value of that debt shrinks by 5% every year. The government pays back the same number of dollars, but those dollars are worth less. Inflation is how governments quietly reduce what they owe. Now think about who owns assets: houses, stocks, land, businesses. When inflation rises, the price of these assets rises with it. If you own property, inflation makes you richer in nominal terms. If you own stocks, the same. But if your wealth is sitting in a savings account, if you're a worker, a pensioner, a young person who hasn't yet bought a house, inflation takes from you and gives to those who already have.
Since 1971, U.S. house prices have risen roughly 2,000%. Wages have risen roughly 600%. The gap between owning assets and not owning them has become the defining economic divide of our era. Inflation didn't create inequality, but it accelerates it every year, automatically. And the system is designed to keep doing exactly this. In 2020, governments around the world faced a crisis unlike anything in living memory. Economies shut down, people couldn't work, businesses closed. The response? Print money, trillions of it, fast. The Federal Reserve created more money in 3 months in 2020 than it had in its entire previous history. The Fed's balance sheet went from $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion in 2 years. Similar things happened in Europe, the UK, Japan, Canada. Every major central bank opened the floodgates simultaneously. At first, it seemed to work. Markets recovered. Unemployment fell. People had money to spend. Then the bill arrived. By 2022, inflation was running at levels not seen since the 1970s. The money that had been created had to go somewhere. It went into prices: food, energy, housing, everything. Central banks then had to raise interest rates sharply to slow the inflation they had caused. Those rate rises made mortgages more expensive. Businesses couldn't borrow to grow. The housing market froze. A recession narrowly avoided in some countries, not avoided at all in others. The people who suffered most, those who didn't own assets, those who rented, those on fixed incomes, those whose wages didn't keep up. The people who did well, those who owned property before the inflation spike, those who owned stocks, those whose debt was fixed while the value of their assets rose. Same story, different century. The mechanism changes, the outcome doesn't. By now, you might be asking the obvious question. If inflation consistently hurts ordinary people, why doesn't anyone fix it? The answer is uncomfortable, because the people who could fix it benefit from it. Governments benefit from inflation because it reduces the real cost of their debt. Banks benefit because they create money through lending and charge interest on it. Asset owners benefit because their property and stocks rise in nominal value. Political donors, financial institutions, large corporations all benefit from the current arrangement. The people who lose are savers, workers, the young, the poor, the retired. These groups have less political power, less lobbying capacity, less access to the rooms where decisions are made. And here's the deeper mechanism. Inflation is invisible. You can see a tax rise, you can see a fee, but inflation works silently, slowly, diffused across millions of prices, in a way that's almost impossible to point at and say, that person stole from me. Al-Ghazali, the 11th century scholar, understood this. He called currency debasement a form of theft. He said it reduces the poor who receive weaker money and rewards those who hold assets. He wrote that nearly 1,000 years ago. The diagnosis hasn't changed, only the technology has. History is consistent on one thing. Paper money loses value. Always. Every currency that has ever existed either collapsed entirely or been significantly debased over time. The Roman denarius, the Byzantine solidus, the Weimar mark, the Zimbabwean dollar, the Lebanese pound. The list is long, and it doesn't end. What survives? Assets, real things, land, productive businesses, commodities, things that can't be printed. The survivors of every financial crisis in history weren't the ones who trusted paper most. They were the ones who understood its limits earliest. After the Black Death, those with liquidity bought land when it was cheap. After Weimar, those with foreign currency or real assets preserved wealth while others starved. After 2008, those with cash bought homes while millions were foreclosed. The pattern repeats because human nature repeats. Governments will always be tempted to print. Central banks will always justify it. And the people who understand what's happening will always position themselves ahead of those who don't. This is not investment advice, it's history. And history has been saying the same thing for 3,000 years. Your money is losing value right now, while you watch this, while you sleep, while you work. Not because of bad luck, not because of incompetence, because of a system designed to work this way, refined over centuries, and maintained by the people who benefit most from it. Understanding this doesn't make you cynical, it makes you prepared. The first step to protecting yourself from a system is understanding how it works. History gave us that understanding thousands of years. We just stopped teaching it.